alaikum, everyone, and welcome to the Muslim Street. This is our weekly edition of the Muslim Street podcast. And of course, on behalf of my co-host, Hina Lotus, we have a special friend to the Muslim Street who's going to join us tonight as we have commentary on race, religion, and politics. Salim Abdul Khalik, he's been on the show before. I want to thank him for joining. And also, just to do some house cleaning, you can find us at www.themuslimstreet.com across all social media. That'll be X, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as, what's that other one? TikTok. You can find us at the Muslim Street. Please like and share. You can find us also, this live reproduction is broadcast on YouTube at the Muslim Street. Please subscribe, like, and share so we can get the word out. This is a new podcast. We want to make sure that this time next year that we're sitting in front of hundreds of thousands of people talking about what is important from a revolutionary perspective from the Muslim Street. And that Muslim Street, that theme is all over the world where you can find Muslims. And that's everywhere. Muslims make up literally approaching 25% of the world's population, which just exceeded 8 billion people. It's the fastest growing religion in the world. It's the largest religion on the African continent. It's the largest religion in India. I'm sorry.
I think definitely not India.
No, I was just joking.
And with the government there, it probably won't be for a while.
Yeah. I was just joking. But the largest Muslim country is in Asia. And that is Indonesia, where you see people taking trips to Bali, stuff like that. Well, that's the largest Muslim country in the world. So the fastest growing religion in the United States, Islam. It is embedded historically in the African experience in the United States. Largely, the African slaves that were captured on the west coast of Africa were Muslim. A large percentage. The diagnosis that you can read some of the works of Dr. Sylvain Diop, who is a Senegalese national, but also one of the world-renowned scholars on this subject. Also read the works of Dr. Yosef Ben Yanakanan, who died a Muslim. He published The African Origin of Civilization. He also published The African Origin of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Also read the work of Sheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese scholar who published many works, but one of his works was Civilization or Barbarism. Now, I wonder what civilization was he talking about, and then when he got to barbarism, I wonder what he was talking about too. Obviously, Western civilization, which has come to destroy any status quo of any kind of egalitarian life amongst the peoples. Everywhere you find it, and I'll quote Dr. Khalid Muhammad, the great Dr. Khalid Muhammad, who passed away in February 2001, who was one of my masters, who said, everywhere that you find the European, everywhere that you find him in history, around the globe or even in Europe, he has been a person that no one gets along with. He has disrupted history. He has disrupted culture. He has imposed his own will vis-a-vis his military might on everywhere that he's come upon. It was this type of disruption that disrupted our history in Africa. It was this disruption that disrupted the Native people, they call Native Americans here in the United States. When Columbus, on the eve of the 16th century, found himself in the West, there were over 200 million of the indigenous people here, an indigenous tribe, what they called themselves Choctaw, what they called themselves Sioux, what they called themselves Cherokee or Seminole. 200 million. Today, 2 million. That's a genocide. 2 million left, right? He destroyed the Mayas. He destroyed the Aztecs everywhere he went. And so I say all that to say, I wanted to start out this discussion that we're going to have amongst the three of us with a dialogue from a Muslim, African Muslim in the United States, Yusuf Jones. And I'll start there. But before I start there, I just want to say that this discussion is going to be hard hitting. We are going to have some open discourse on the question of race, religion, and politics. So Yusuf Jones, he publishes a piece called Malcolm X did not center Arab authority, he centered truth. Now, you heard me mention that prior to me reading this, you heard me mention that African people in the United States were captured from West Africa and that we were largely Muslim. This is due to Islam being the dominant religion on the western coast of Africa, be it in Guinea, be it in the northern part of what now is Nigeria, be it in Ghana, in Kumasi, where Lance Scurv is producing our show from Ghana, the Muslim Street, and we want to thank Lance for doing that.
We love you, Lance.
Yeah. So here you have.
Thank you.
Here you have this historical Muslim population who are African, enslaved over 400 years ago, hurried and shackled on ships, made to cross the Atlantic Ocean on what is famously and infamously known as a European slave trade. It is not the transatlantic slave trade. This is the mind of a colonizer who even used language like that. Transatlantic, yeah, we can get into it being a triangle, where they took labor from the African continent, brought it to the West, South America, the Caribbean, and into North America, had them produce goods, be it cotton, tobacco, etc., sugar, and out of sugarcane, and then ship that to Europe in order for it to prosper. That's the only triangle that we're interested in, because slavery, if you look at that context, becomes an economic condition, as George Jackson called it, right? The Soledad brother, that slavery is an economic condition. Obviously, it was fueled by power and race. But here you have millions of African Muslims captured in America over 300 years. As Malcolm put it, 310 years, where we were made to work from sun up to sundown, or can't see in the morning until can't see at night. And under brutal conditions, took the entire West in that triangle from a feudal civilization through the introduction of what is known as the agrarian revolution. And then as we look at the beginning of the 19th century with the creation and invention of the cotton gin in the early part of the 19th century, the transition into the technological revolution, agrarian revolution. So the spite of that is done on the backs of African slaves who were Muslim, right? So they stole our religion from us. They beat it out of us. They wouldn't allow us to pray. They wouldn't allow us to call out the name of Allah. And over a period of centuries, they, at the same time, they reintroduced they being the white slave masters, introduced their religion, European Christianity, to the slaves. And that's the only thing that we could practice. And part of that was he inserted himself and his dominance over the African people in this country who are now his slaves. He inserted himself as a master and had us praying to him. We worship his deity as white. They painted Jesus as white. They gave all of Jesus' disciples European names: John, Luke, Mark. There's no John, Luke, Marks in Africa. And the Bible starts in Africa. Okay, let's be clear about this. And some would argue, and I don't like this argument, but I hear it coming out of Muslims who are unconscious, non-blacks, and also quote unquote Arabs. They say, well, Jesus was from the Middle East. It was not from the Middle East. There was no Middle East until the latter part of the 19th century. So it's not from the Middle East. It wasn't even called the Middle East. And if it is a Middle East, where's the middle? Where's the Middle West? There is none. All right. So study the economics of the construct of what was called the Middle East and how they created it and why they created it before you use that type of terminology in the mid to late 1860s. Now, that brings us to this African slave. All right. It wasn't until the birth of several conscious movements in the 19 teens, the 1920s, 1930s that caused a gateway for these African Muslims to return to the religion of their forefathers after 400 years. This was miraculous. This was a miracle from Allah. We had movements like Noble Drew Ali in the mid to late 1920s. You had the consciousness of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, who to this day, the UNIA, the United Negro Improvement Association, launches the largest Black organization in the history of Black America in our struggle. All right. Some argue that he had 8 million Blacks on their rolls, and there were only 14 million of us in this country. That's a number that puts us at 40% of all Black people affected and were part of the Garvey movement. Garvey said at his national convention in 1925, amongst his committee members, that if they were going to choose a religion that would represent the UNIA, they would choose Islam. So the bed was being set. And then in the 1930s, the Nation of Islam arises with Farad Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X leaves the prison system in 1952 with several of his family members who encouraged him to be part of the Nation of Islam while he was in prison. He gets out in 1952, and there's a convergence of the Black movement, 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, and the militant movement that Malcolm helped spark, and the rise of Dr. King, 1955, in the Birmingham bus boycott. And now we have a situation where the movement amongst Black consciousness is converging in a quick pace over the next 10 to 12 years, that Malcolm was able to organize hundreds of thousands of people, whether they were inside of the Nation of Islam or not. And I say or not because that becomes important in the Cultural Revolution. We argue that before there's a political revolution, there first must be a cultural revolution, and our minds have to be saved first, right? So the books of Salim, Dr. Bobby Wright, who created the term menticide, Dr. Carter G. Woodson in the 1930s, who wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. All this to the works of Dr. Jacob Carruthers and Dr. Ivor Carruthers, all in the 1970s. All of this to get our minds out of the context of white supremacy. Very important. So back to these Muslims. So these Muslims who have now reclaimed the religion of their foreparents, who was a religion that was stolen from us, and they made our families Christian. All right, and in the Black community, you might have, and this is Salim is from Chicago. I'm from Chicago. Salim in the early 1980s, from Racine, 87th Street, to Racine on 71st Street. That's 16 blocks, if I'm counting right. I counted the number of churches. I've asked this question over the years to many people. I said, how many churches do you think would there be need to serve 16 blocks? On one block, 16 blocks. And they said, oh, maybe 3 or 4, something like that. Well, I counted, it was over 60 churches. Wow. 60 churches, storefront churches next to storefront churches, next to liquor stores, next to storefront churches, and this one, all of them down the block on both sides of the block. Now, so they made us Christian. They made us hate ourselves. They made us hate our dark skin, our broad noses, our African features, our hair. They made us hate every existence in our connection to Africa. And here comes Islam, right? Islam turns us back and turns our hearts back to Africa, right? It does it in a way historically, and I want to talk about this in the context of our struggle, in the context of throwing off white oppression. That's the context. So it becomes part of the Cultural Revolution. So there's no separating. Oh, I just want to go make my 5 prayers a day. Oh, I want to pay my zakat. I want to make fast the Ramadan. I want to make the Hajj to Mecca. And before I do it, the first pillar of Islam, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. That's the basis of what we do, right? That's the basis of us. But because we're in the context of struggle, Islam militates for justice. So, and it's not until, and this begins, this a few excerpts from this article I'm going to read by Yusef Jones, and then we can jump right into it. It's not until 2 things happen. One, during the 1920s and 1930s, Lebanese Christians who are Arabs come into the United States. They seek whiteness in the United States. They actually petitioned the United States government to classify Arabs as white. And guess what happened? They won. So if a Arab coming from Egypt or Sudan, who is as dark as I am, petitions for citizenship in the United States, they classify them as Caucasian. That's today. Read the works of Dr. Khalid al-Mansour, who wrote 30 books on the Afro-Arab. And he talked about this situation. He documented the situation with a specific Muslim, African, dark as me brother out of Egypt. And we'll get to that in a minute. But so then there's a stall during the 1940s under Roosevelt against immigration, right? In 1966, on the heels of the 1964 Voting Rights Act and the 1965 Civil Rights Act, in 1966 they passed what was called the Immigration Act. And here now there's a flood of immigrants coming in from Muslim countries, and with them they bring their culture, and with them, and they also bring the religion of Islam. But they set up mosques, away from the Black community. Let's be honest with this, right? They went to the suburbs. They're here to be white. Let's be clear about this, right? Now, I'm not mad at them for whatever intent that they wanted to come to this country for, to find themselves inside of the white construct, but don't impose that on the African Muslims who are already here. So, and we'll get into that, but I'm just reading a couple of excerpts from Yusef Jones, and I'm going to turn this mic over. Malcolm X did not center Arab authority, he centered truth. This claim is a classic distortion dressed up in academic tone, but grounded in the same colonial impulse. The need to route all legitimacy in Islam through Arab male scholarship. To say that Malcolm centered Arab men or Arabic itself as the ultimate source of Islam is misreading, one that projects today institutional loyalties onto a man who was far more radical, discerning, and a cosmopolitan than most are ready to admit. Read revolutionary, right? Last thing I will read before we jump in this, because this is kind of elongated. I'm going to ask Yusef Jones, you might want to do the same, Salim. Can we reprint this entire article on the Muslim street? And I hope he allows us to do that. Goes on to say, let us be clear, Malcolm X centered Islam and not Arabs. Malcolm did not emerge from the Islamic world's scholastic traditions. He emerged from his prophetic tradition, one of the calling out oppression, refusing silence, and seeking truth wherever it may be. His journey after the Nation of Islam was not toward Arabization. It was toward principled globalism. And I would add, in his political thrust, if we read the works of Zach Kondo, Dr. Obata Shaka, who wrote The Political Legacy of Malcolm X in 1983, which I think is the best piece on Malcolm and his political philosophy, we see Malcolm as a Pan-African revolutionary, and then domestically a Black nationalist. Let's be clear about that. Okay. There's no, I saw white people in Mecca and I ate from the same. That was a host, and we can get into why Malcolm politically played the civil rights movement with that letter that he wrote from Mecca. And we can talk about that a little later. I just want to drop that out there. But the last thing I'll say from Yusef Jones, he makes a point here about Malcolm that centering Arabs has become a new false Qibla, right? Affecting, all these African Muslims and any Muslims who come actually from other places, centering in the Arabs as the new false Qibla. He says, and I'll close here before I open up the floor, ironically, the insistence that Malcolm X centered Arab male scholars says more about the speakers who propagate this stuff than it does Malcolm. It reveals a worldview where legitimacy only flows from Gulf-funded institutions, madrasas, Arabic grammar, and male clerical hierarchies. Hina, jump in.
That was a lot. Definitely a lot of information, but I think you made a lot of very, very key points. I think a lot of people forget that when we live, whether it's in the West or the East, a lot of people tend to center government, culture, race, things of that nature, as opposed to first and foremost, our religion, Islam, which has given us every tool necessary to navigate life. The second thing I think they always forget is they work in various different factions and they don't, work as an ummah per se. And I think that when he basically was discussing, the Arab Authority, and he said we need to focus on truth. Truth in Arabic, of course, is haq. And that is one of the tenets of our faith. I think a lot of people will listen to propaganda, or they will look at various different, capitalistic, vices, if you will, and become very greedy or become very dunya focused. And I think when you focus back on deen, you realize that truth is truth, right? No matter who says it. And at the end of the day, if we put that first and foremost when it comes to the way we view logic, when we make decisions in life, when we look at people who are suffering, when we look at things like, genocide and all the terrible things going on in the world, I think we will stay, as close to, if not on Sirat al-Mustaqim. So I think that we really do need to focus on deen. And through the lens of Islam, I think that's the only way that we can move forward as a community. Because, for example, there's a multitude of people who say that, okay, we need to focus on issues that, only serve our communities, but we have to look at it as a collective.
Yeah. So great point. Brother Salim, Malcolm, through his travels in 1964, as he, in 1965, in the African world. He talked about a Pan-African, Pan-Arab, Pan-Asian alliance that we were moving toward. He mentioned the Ban Conference. He mentioned the non-aligned movement, and he was moving toward that, right? So he organized with people like Gamal Abdel Nasser, an Arab, right? As a true revolutionary. Now, Yusuf Jones writes on this piece that I want you to jump in 1965. It was one of Malcolm's last speeches that he did in Detroit. And I think this is one after his house was firebombed. And he was kind of speaking hoarse. It might have been the message to the grassroots speech with Reverend Cleage at Reverend Cleage's church. Yusuf Jones writes, Malcolm X repeatedly challenged Arab societies in his own words. This is that during a speech in 1965, right prior to his death. Malcolm says, I've seen some of the most racist Arabs toward Africans. Don't think that just because someone is Muslim, they are immune to the disease of racism. And again, that's one of his last speech. It might have been the one he did, a message to the grassroots at Reverend Cleage's church right before his assassination. What do you say?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for allowing me an opportunity to participate in the program along with yourself and Sister Hina. And let me also add that, I don't look, I'm not a scholar at this kind of thing. I'm just
no one on this program is. You're totally okay.
I'm just a grassroots, consider myself to be a grassroots activist here in Chicago, doing my best, try to uplift our lost people. But let me just say this, that Islam is a revolutionary way of life. Islam is a revolutionary way of life. And that's why Malcolm remained a Muslim all the way to the end. And it becomes imperative, since we're on the topic of racism, politics, and religion, it becomes imperative for us to understand that it's the duty of every Muslim, not just illustrious Muslims like Malcolm X. It becomes imperative on each and every one of us to understand our obligation and role to stand up, to speak out, and confront racism wherever it rears its head. And I remember reading the autobiography of Malcolm X some decades ago for the first time, and I remember a part in his book where he spoke about racism in the Arab world, and he stated something to the effect that wherever you find racism in the Arab world, it is because of the effect that Western culture and capitalism, had on certain Arab societies. And this happens to be a big problem in the Islamic community. We often, when I come on social media, I often hear some Muslims say we are all one, there's no racism in Islam. And that while there is no racism in Islam, it is a fact that we have many racist Muslims. And that's an issue that is often bypassed, is often the elephant in the room. And there are not enough Islamic scholars, sheikhs, imams, and leaders consciously and regularly dealing with this particular topic. And it becomes imperative, that we have more shows like this where we can talk about it.
Yeah, good point. The something I want you guys both to chime in on from your perspectives. I've been a Muslim. It's the only religion I ever known, right? Two encounters from two different perspectives. One, when I meet Muslims from other countries, we are talking about the 1966 Immigration Act. That is literally how they got here. The first thing they'll say is, wow, when did you become Muslim? Now, why wouldn't they assume that I was Muslim already? I never knew any other religion. I've never been to church. Never got up and went to church on Sunday. I went there one time when I was a Muslim because my mother was a Christian, and she said, bring you to church so you can talk to them about Islam. I already talked to the preacher about it. It was an amazing day. I'll tell you all about that. So, and then I shut them down and I say, all of the Sahaba, all of them were converts to Islam. Bilal was a convert to Islam. Abu Bakr Sadiq, convert to Islam. All right. Umar, convert to Islam. Uthman, convert to Islam. Ali, the Khalifa Rashidim, all converts to Islam, right? So it's not until you have the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in who came later after them who are born Muslim, right? So those who converted to Islam and took their Shahada literally have in common with the Sahaba, and that shuts them down. The other thing I want to say is this, and I'll let you both jump in on me going back and forth there on these intra-Muslim relations, is that European colonialism finds its way into the Muslim world fairly easy. Why? Because there was a dynamic power struggle that went on after the death of the Prophet ﷺ around one question, and that's who should rule, right? The Sunnis won out. The Sunni, the Khawarij, and of course the Shia. We don't see the Shia in power until between the 3rd and 4th century Hijra, right? They built the University of Al-Azhar in Egypt. That was under the Fatimiyas, the Fatima rule. The Fatimiyas are Shia. That's it for them in their rule. Who's been in rule since? Hakala Sunnah. They won out. They're interested in the stability right? So the Sunnis, as we look at the actions of Saudi Arabia today and the Emiratis and the Qatarians buying Trump a plane and all that kind of stuff, they're interested in stability, right? Now, that stability causes them to self-define vis-a-vis the non-Muslims. The Shia and the Khawarij and what's left self-define vis-a-vis the Sunnis, right? Because if you look at Khomeini's rise in 1979 in Iran, it comes in a revolutionary tint. They say the rule of the Europeans and colonialism has to go. It's always been the Shia's position, right? So that's why if you look at who is presently fighting off the Zionists and sending arms and blood, it's the Shia. They don't like the present day standard. The Houthis, Shia. Hezbollah, Shia. The Iranians, Shia. Those are the ones who are standing up for the Palestinians in terms of blood, right? Because they don't like the present setup. The Sunnis, let's negotiate this. Let's chill a minute because they want stability, the status quo. Now, last thing I would say, and I want your observations from both of you on this. I made Hajj to Mecca in 2005. And then while I was in Mecca, I saw this brother look just like Denzel Washington. They're twins, same color, same look at it. I walked up to him and said, "What's your name?" He said, "My name is Abdullah." And it's broken English. And I said, "Man, you know who you look like, though." He said, "Man, every time you guys come over here, you say it." He like Denzel Washington. Listen, when I got back and I made a couple of speeches about Hajj, I took Q&A from Black American Muslims. They're like, "What about those pale Arabs over there and all that?" I said, no. The Hajj is dark. I saw dark people everywhere I went. Right. Who were indigenous. I asked Abdullah, where did they come from? Did you come from the Sudan? Did y'all get here from, like East Africa somewhere? He's like, no. We're the original people from here. Right. Correcting me, right? So it challenged me to say that part of my interaction, I have to leave stereotypes that have dictated to me what the relationship is going to be like. I have to leave my own stereotypes behind too. So that's the challenge, right? We have to deal with each other as individuals, not as collective strokes, and give people a chance. Because their politics, and he and I talk about this all the time, their politics may be in line with your politics. Their cultural analysis may be in line with yours. And what more can we ask for, right? So anyway, the last thing I'll say on this is, on this point, before I would like you guys to chime in, is that I've been throughout the Muslim world, Sudan, the Emiratis, Qatar. I've traveled to Morocco, Senegal, northern Nigeria to Kanu, Kumasi, where Lance is in Ghana, populated by Muslims, right? My favorite place to go, though, is Morocco. Why? Because there are towns and villages and villages of Amazigh, what the Europeans call the Berber, who are chocolate as I am, right? And even the ones that are not, they level set. They treat you based upon how pious you are, how nice you are. So that's why I love that place. We need to challenge ourselves with stereotypes that we may have amongst others, and deal with people how they deal with you. Anyway, Hina.
No, you made extremely good points, because I think being, within the Muslim community, there's a lot of racism. I've heard a lot of anti-Black sentiments from Middle Eastern people, South Asians, all across the board. I've seen a lot of anti-Indian, anti-Pakistani hate from like Arab community. Then you have like Iranians and Arabs will go at it. Then you have the Kurds, which are being subjugated by the Turks, the Arabs, and the Iranians. I mean, it's just a mess. And I think a lot of Muslims always forget that as long as we continue to fight each other, it's easier for the Western world, for those who uphold capitalism, for those who uphold colonialism, for those who uphold imperialism, to then, continue to oppress us, right? Because if I'm going to waste my energy being anti-Black or anti-Arab or anti-Turk or whatever the case may be, who at the end of the day are my brothers and sisters in Islam, they don't need to do divide and conquer. We've already divided ourselves and they've continued to conquer us. So I think a lot of people will look at, our community and say, why are we so subjugated? Why are we so oppressed? You see it going on with Kashmir in India. You see it in, all over Africa. You see it in all over the Middle East. You see it in so many different countries around the world. Muslims are, they do not have freedom of religion. They're going through genocide. You see what the Palestinians are going through. We see what's going on, in Syria. We see what's going on in Yemen. And we say, why us? But at the end of the day, it's so easy to say, well, it's colonialism. It's this, it's that. I'm not saying it isn't. But if we're not holding ourselves accountable and saying, hey, we need to stop anti-Blackness, we need to uphold and support Pan-Africanism and Pan-Arabism, and we need to hold the Gulf states accountable for what they are allowing to happen to Palestine and Iran and all these other regions. We need to uphold the governments that are subjugating their own people, especially religious Muslim minorities. If we don't hold ourselves accountable for the racism that's going on within our communities, it's going to be a million times harder than to hold other governments who are not Muslim, don't uphold the deen, the morals, the values, the ethics of Islam to take us seriously, right? Because if we fight amongst each other, we kind of make ourselves look like a joke, first and foremost. Secondly, it makes it that much more easy for the West to basically imperialize these regions. So I think self-accountability is very, very important. And that's why it's important to me as like a Pakistani to discuss anti-Blackness and Pan-Africanism, but also to bring up Palestine and Kashmir and all these other regions.
Yeah, great point. So, Salim, I maintain that we have to continue as revolutionaries to debunk the notion that Malcolm made his Hajj and after his Hajj to Mecca and what he experienced there spiritually, that it turned him into an integrationist, i.e. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What do you say about this?
I would deny that emphatically. Happen to be reading Dr. John Henry Clarke's book on Malcolm, The Man in His Times, and he constantly re-emphasized that Malcolm died as a Pan-Africanist and a Black nationalist. And there's no contradiction. We have to understand that there is no contradiction between those political ideologies and philosophies with Islam. Let me before I say something else on that, let me say what I had intended on saying after Hina. I have a book, Islamic book in my library. I believe I bought this book from either Kazi bookstore on the Belmont or either Ikra Books up on Divine here in Chicago, both Islamic books. I can't remember exactly where I purchased this book. This is a book on Islam written by some Pakistani ulama, and there's this racist statement they made in this publication that if anyone would dare suggest that the Prophet Muhammad had African blood, even though he did do the Black Egyptian woman Hagar, who is the mother of Islam and who is the one responsible for starting the Hajj ritual, the Pakistani ulama said that if anyone would dare suggest that the Prophet Muhammad had any African blood, that they would issue a fatwa of kufr against such an individual. My question would be to these people who think like these Muslims who think like that, is that what difference should it really make what complexion the Prophet Muhammad is? In fact, I believed in the Prophet Muhammad when I was under the illusion that he was a pale-looking white man. You understand? Until I found out differently.
Let me ask you.
I have had debates with Turkish Muslims on social media, Facebook, and they got so heated at me when I mentioned that Jesus was non-white with brown skin, something like mine. And the Turkish Muslim told me,
no, he was darker than you. Yeah, stop it, bro.
okay.
Salim, I want to get to something.
But let me just make this point. The Turkish Muslim told me the chapter 3, I think verse 106 of the Quran, when it says that on the day of judgment, there will be some people with black faces sent into the hellfire. While those with white faces or light faces will be into Jannah. And he told me, the Turkish Muslim told me, that this was talking about black people. The black people would be the one that.
So he interpreted it as race.
Yeah. So Salim, two things I want to dissect in what you just said. Forget about what this Turkish Muslim underneath.
No, I'm just illustrating racism in the Islamic world. That's all I'm doing, illustrating racism in the Muslim world.
I mean, Turkey's part of NATO. Let's start with that, and then we'll work backwards.
You know, Istanbul was Constantinople. It was the headquarters of Christianity during the 4th century. So anyway, under Constantine, right? So anyway, I want to dissect a couple of things that you just said. One is, I want to ask you, you stated that prior to you finding in your research that Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his family was of African descent. And read the works of Dr. Khalid Mansour, who wrote 30 books on the Afro-Arab. Read the works of Dr. Yosef Ben Yanakanan. Read the works of also Dr. Sullivan. Also read the works of Dr. Sheikh Anta Dia to support that. But
let me also add the book Glory of the Black Race by scholar Al-Jahiz, who was an Islamic scholar in the 8th century. He wrote a book called The Glory of the Black Race, mentioning the African ancestry of Prophet Muhammad.
And not only was he a scholar in Medina, but he was the foremost scholar in Medina. Right?
Wrote 200 books. He wrote 200 books.
Yeah. So Salim, here's my question to you. You said before your research that you thought he was white. You thought he was,
and I had accepted.
Salim, hold on. Let me finish my question, bro.
Yeah.
You said this, right? And I think a lot of this has to do with post 1966, the Immigration Act, in the Black community. When they see Arabs, they see them from Lebanon. They see them from Palestine. They see them from Yemen, right? And places like that, right? They see them from Egypt, right? And these are, in most cases, light-skinned Arabs. So in them, and I think that what's going on in the Black community inside of our psyche is that when we hear Muslim and Islam, and Middle East and Arabs, we immediately go to who's running that corner store in the Black community, as that's the representation. The second thing I want to say, and I want you to address that, hold that. I want you to address that. The second thing I want to say about this thing about Jesus, right? You said brown skin. It seems, and feel free to correct me in your retort, but I see a lot of Black people lately on social media talking about this brown thing. No, we're Black. Okay, that's the origin. Wait. Let's hold those two things. The Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam on the Isra Miraj, the night journey, he said that when he got to the first level of Jannah, the first level of paradise, he saw Isa, he saw Jesus, and he said he was Black. That is tradition.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely, my brother. I agree with that. But when I said brown a few minutes ago, what I really meant was Black. When I said brown like me, just saying, I consider myself to be Black.
I understand, you know, but I'm not refuting you and your Black consciousness. No, not and your love for Blackness. I've been seeing a lot of this wordplay going on in social media amongst these unconscious Black people now calling themselves brown because they want to see if they can get along with white people a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, believe me, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean it that way because I don't consider anybody to be any Black. Khalid Muhammad wasn't any Blacker than myself. consciously.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So on those 2 points, the first point being that I made about the Arab stores that are in the Black community selling whiskey, wine, and pork, and dirty magazines, by the way, right? And taking our little young non-Muslim sisters, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, around in the back of the store and doing sexual favors. And this is all documented stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, man, I've led protests against them.
So this is the impression of when you say Black people and they say, they don't even call it Arabs, they say Arab, right? And they think that the prophet looks like these people. And I was like, no. Right? So kind of address that in that context.
Well, you're absolutely correct in your analysis. This is a blight. The Arab liquor stores, with the selling bad food products, drug paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia also, and other vices that they push in our community. Again, this is a blight on the Black community. It's a blight on the image of Islam, and it also indicative of how racist and prejudiced they are against Black people, because many of these products, that are doing harm to our people, they wouldn't dare sell it to their own people. You understand?
Hina,
huh?
Hina, I want to get Hina in this conversation. Hina, prior to the Arabs from those countries that I talked about, who took advantage of the United States Immigration Act of 1966, when they came here in the early 1970s, late 70s, early 80s, they began to buy up these stores in the Black community. Guess who owned the stores that they bought prior to them? You want to know who owned them? Zionist Jews, who have been ripping off Black people for decades. Am I right, Salim?
Malcolm used to talk about that. Yeah. Malcolm used to talk about that.
On Harlem.
The Jewish influence, the Jewish, they were the ones that were renting to the Black people. They were the ones that had the liquor stores in the Black community. And like Malik said, the Arabs took over from the Zionist Jews.
Okay, Hina, I want to get you in this conversation as we close out. Again, just for house cleaning, this is The Muslim Street. You can find us at www.themuslimstreet.com. Also, you can find us across all social media and on YouTube at The Muslim Street. Please like and share and subscribe. My co-host, Hina Lotus. Hina, I want you to respond to this. Now, I'm talking to this Black American Muslim sister the other day. She sends me this video. And this video is from a group of Black Muslims down in Houston. They dressed up in their thobes and their Muslim gear, and they go by one of these stores that we're talking about, these Arab-ran stores that are selling whiskey, wine, pork, dirty magazines, dirty videos, and Salim said even they set up as a head shop, right? Selling drug paraphernalia. So the brothers go into the store. They dressed up, right? And they said they appealed to the owner. They asked for the owner. He comes. They say, brother, this is against Islam. You really shouldn't be doing this. This is your first warning. We're going to come back again, right? So the next week they came back again. Brother, you shouldn't be doing this. But if you do it again, we're gonna call to action, right? So third time they go back, the following third week, and they say, okay, it's time for the call to action. And the call to action is, Salim, Hina, is that they start holding picket signs and they are protesting in front of the store, trying to embarrass the store owner. Now, hold that. That's 2025. In 2006, the same situation erupted in Oakland, California. Black Muslims, the fruit of Islam, under the guidance of not Minister Louis Farrakhan, but Yusuf Bey, who has since passed on. They run Oakland. They go into the Arab store and they say the same thing. They say, we're coming back 3 times. This is your first warning. Second time they come back the next week. We warned you twice. The third time it's going to be a call to action. The brothers of the Fruit of Islam, Salim, Hina, they went back the third time and they cleaned out the store. Right? Throwing the liquor outside on they called the police and had the brothers arrested. The brothers were marching in there, paramilitary style, and they took care of the business. Now, I'm going to ask both of you, right? Which one of those are the revolutionary action that we should take in order to shut down that hypocrisy.
You know.
Hina's on mute. Hina's on mute. Salim, jump in, please.
Well, only thing I can say that sounds similar to a incident that involved myself here in Chicago a couple of decades ago on the west side of Chicago, when I ran into a sister that told me she went into an Arab liquor store and asked about a product, and the Arab called her a black bitch. And when she did that, I told the sister that, we're going to organize that next week. I showed up with a bunch of Muslim brothers and non-Muslim and told them that they can't treat our people like this in our community, and that we were going to protest. They told me that I couldn't protest in front of their store and call some gangbangers who, obviously, was connected with them in the community. They offered to pay them $500 to come against me and the Muslim brothers, but we stood our ground, my brother. And eventually what happened was, because we couldn't get the support of the community in our protest, because black people were still going in the store, regardless of the violation,
So
we had to call off the protest. So it just depends, brother. It depends.
So you're in favor of the 2025 nonviolent protests that holding up signs, as opposed to the paramilitary action that the Fruit of Islam took in 2006, where they went in and they bust that whole store up and put fear in the hearts of the owners of that store, that whole community. I don't even want to talk about the outcome on
you know what? If I had those type of brothers with me back then, I would have done the same thing.
Chokwe Lumumba, one of my masters in 1982 at a conference in Chicago, Savior's Day conference, on a workshop on Malcolm X. He was debating Dr. Conrad Worrell, Akbar Muhammad, who was another one of my masters, who Lance knows greatly over in Africa. He was also debating Preston Wilcox and the late J2 Wausi. Now, Chokwe Lumumba said this. He said, we need, talking about the Black community, a paramilitary force like the Fruit of Islam. And then he said, we need a paramilitary force who would tell us who is coming in the community, what they're doing there, and who won't be coming out. Right? Our instructions are clear. It's not to hold signs up or protest and do the. I was telling the sister, I was like, that's a waste of time. I said, if you want to get the message across, it's revolutionary action. This was the Black Panthers. This was the BLA. It was revolutionary action, right? In order to make a statement that is long lasting, that we ain't tolerating this no more. They don't fear anybody holding signs. They don't fear any protests. They're like, all right. And look, they, in your case, and I find this quite amazing, they co-opted really the paramilitary force that is in our community, working against our community on ourselves, and that's the gangbangers. That we should have politicized them, and they'd be working on our behalf, because we literally have a paramilitary force in place. They just need their level of consciousness.
Re-education.
Yeah. Hina,
I apologize. My mic was muted for a second. No, what I was actually going to say is, it's interesting because the example that you brought up actually ties into what I was saying earlier. I think a lot of Muslims, and not just in the West, I think globally speaking, they put dunya over deen. And so if you're putting dunya over deen, you're going to look at, well, what has the highest profit margins? The sex industry, alcohol, all these things that are essentially sins, right, in Islam. But those things are very profitable, pork and, so on and so forth. So they make a profit off of basically selling sin, indulging in sin to a certain degree, I'm sure, if they're selling it and, marketing it or what have you. And I think that's the problem. When we start looking at dunya and we start looking at all these, aspects of capitalism and Western culture, I think a lot of people start thinking short term, and they're like, well, what's going to make me the most money? What's going to make you the most money isn't always what's in line with your religion. And I think that's why it's so important to put religion first. And I think, if revolutionary action is what's necessary to create a shift, then so be it. I think at the end of the day, we can't enforce Sharia law on non-Muslims, right? And that's a huge misconception in the West. But if someone is a Muslim is, saying that they're upholding, their religion, practicing what have you, but they are basically giving tools to society to sin and profiting off of it, and they were given warnings, what else can you really do at the end of the day?
Yeah, good point.
Well, again, in my case, the community supported the liquor store. So, I mean, what can you do when the people support corruption? You know what I mean? I mean, if it was a Muslim community and they had a store selling alcohol and pork, okay, then I could see taking it there. But when you got a community of people that want to continue to support, even when you're trying to educate them against the corruption that's going on, and they want to continue supporting, there's only so much that you can do.
The Fruit of Islam answered that question as a cadre, and they struck a blow for the struggle. They said, we're going in no matter the consequences. One of the brothers, he was in his 70s, Hina. He was like 75 years old. Marched right in there with him. They were all dressed up in Fruit of Islam standard uniform, white shirt, bow ties, dark suits, stepping fast, clean cut haircuts, and they put fear into that situation. So much so, Brother Salim, something very hypocritical came out of that was that the newspapers were saying that these were members of the Nation of Islam, which they were. These were members of the Fruit of Islam, which they were. It just happened to be a different faction than Minister Farrakhan's Fruit of Islam. Well, his West Coast representative, Tony Muhammad, called a press conference, flew up from Los Angeles all the way up to Oakland, called a press conference with the Arab store owner in solidarity with the Arab store owner against those Fruit of Islam who went in there and took care of the business. I remember getting into many discussions with both sides. And I was like, look, I'm on the side of the brothers that went in that store. Okay. I wish I was there. Matter of fact, I really wish I was there because, we did some damage on the south side of Chicago, the way we rolled up in that situation. But this is a problem because look at the outcome. The outcomes are when they think of Muslims, they think of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they think of these people. They think of these people. This is the outcome. And the brothers who struck that blow in 2006, and you can pull it up. I even posted an article on that. I'll send it to both of you guys after this call. That was long lasting, whereas this brother in 2025, Haki, mashallah, you shouldn't be selling that. Well, he shouldn't be selling that. You already know it, right? No, you don't ask them.
But can I be honest? This is an issue in the community in general. Obviously we see it in the Arab community, but do you know how many Muslims, irrelevant of race, to be honest, I've seen, hey, they're club owners, they're selling alcohol, they're working in alcohol sales, some of them own very questionable places and then go to the mosque afterwards. And, and it's a problem in the community as a whole. And I do think that people like that should be called out in general. Because I think to sit there and say that you're a religious person, you're upholding the religion, you're, going to the mosque, X, Y, and Z, but then to basically engage in sin, profit off of sin, and give the tools and resources to sin to the community is, in direct, conflict with that.
I totally agree with that. Only thing I would add on to that is that I went over at the beginning of the show the history of Islam in this country and how they took it away from us, and now how we, the Brother Salims of the world, in the Black community, are tasked with bringing our people back to Islam, bringing them back to the miracle that we experienced. And look what gets in the way of that, right? That gets in the way. And that comes up all the time, Salim.
Yeah. Can I just make some a quick say, because you're getting ready to shut the show down.
30 seconds and we shutting down.
Yeah. Just in relation to the question that you asked about Malcolm and Pan-Africanism, I think is very much needed, that our people, Black people, come to Islam, but it's imperative that our people understand the importance of learning our history and our culture and being connected to the philosophy of Marcus Garvey and Black nationalism, in order to, preserve our identity and culture.
Yeah, that's a good point. As we close out the show, I want to thank Salim, Malik, and also we have my co-host, Lotus, join us next week. What we got coming up next week? A great show on June 8th.
Yeah, so next week we actually have someone from RJS Film, or our RSJ Film coming on. So we have a great episode planned for everyone.
So please join us, tell the crowd, tell everybody on Facebook, tell everybody on social media, like and share our work. And also in the future, we're going to start opening up the lines for this conversation on the outside. I see a lot of your comments in the chat. Malik Aziz, on behalf of producer Last Curve Show, Muslim Street. See you next week.
Thanks,